Hi there, I'm glad you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire. Today we're doing some ink layering with non-layering products. Layering stencils and layering stamps are very popular these days, but I wanted to show you that you can get a similar layered look using single stamps or single stencils. This is a great way to create new colors because you're layering inks, but also create patterns, new looks, and more. Now I have a bunch of examples for you today. I'm actually using two new releases. I wanted to use both, so I thought I'd combine them together. One is from Simon Says Stamp and one is from Waffle. So I have lots of examples for you using stamps, stencils, and lots of colors of inks. We'll start with this card here where I use single stamps, but stamp them repeatedly and overlapping to create a fun, colorful pattern. Now for this and the next few cards, I'm using some new Simon Says Stamp products. We have the Geo Leaf background stamp on the left, the Geo Flower Builder there in the center, and then we have a stencil over there on the right, which I'm actually going to use in our next video, so stay tuned for the next video also. That one is called the Bold Geometric Stencil. I really like how these products can be used together or separately. I also have this Happy Hello stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I thought the style of this worked well with these stamp sets. You can see there's a coordinating die set available for this one, and there is a great folksy layering set that goes along with this. I'm not using that today, but I wanted to show it to you in case you're the type of person who likes to mix and match stencils, dies, and stamps together. It's awfully pretty stencil set, but again, we're not going to use that today. All right, now let's get started with this background. For this, I'm using that Builder stamp set, the clear stamp set. And I have my Misty stamping tool set up with a sticky mat in the inside. I'm placing my white cardstock piece right in the rectangle at the center of the sticky mat. It's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I then have this alignment guide. It's a grid printed on a clear material. It's new from Misty. There are many different grids out there. I'm holding it over my cardstock, which is cut to the same size, so that I can figure out how to get these two images centered. First, we have the one in the middle that's centered right at the middle of our card, and then the one next to it. If you don't have a clear grid like this, you could draw pencil marks and erase them later. I'm inking this image up with some Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink. This is the Cadet color, and I will talk more about why I chose this ink later on. However, do know you could use any dye inks for this. Now, after I've stamped that, I'm going to remove the middle image, then rotate my sticky mat. So watch, I'm going to rotate it so I can stamp the same image over on the right-hand side. Since I put my white cardstock piece at the center of the sticky mat, I can do that. If you do not have a sticky mat, stay tuned. I'll show you another way to do this pattern building technique. Okay, so now we have our middle images done. I'm going to stamp the same images up towards the top and down towards the bottom, overlapping with different colors. So I put that grid back in place, and now I'm taking the same image, but I'm going to rotate it and overlap it. And I'll do the little leaf over to the right of it too. So I'm just following the grid lines on that grid transparency we have on top. Now I can ink this up with another color. Notice that I made sure that these overlapped with our original stamping, which will create another shade of color where it overlaps. This will become more evident when we do two different colors. Here I'm just doing blues. So I stamped it once, then I rotated my mat 180 degrees, and I'll stamp it again. See how we're starting to build a pattern. You may notice that sometimes I stamp the same image a few times. In this case, I wanted the color to be a bit darker, so stamping it multiple times was a way to achieve that. In other cases, I really need to re-ink my ink pad. Okay, back to the alignment guide on top. I'm moving that leaf over to the other side. So you see I have it lined up over on the right, just kind of mirroring the one that's on the left. And I'll stamp this with the same ink in this position. Then I will rotate my mat 180 degrees again to get the other position. I really find a sticky mat for the inside of my stamping tool to be a huge help, especially in things like this. If you do not have one, you could cut your cardstock to fit perfectly into your Misty and then just rotate it and build your pattern in the center. There are many ways you can do it, and again, I'll demonstrate another later. All right, now I've put my grid alignment back on top of the cardstock, lining up the next position for these images, and this time I'll stamp with a surf ink. Now, I mentioned that I would be using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks for a few reasons. One is I like that you can do this, where you can stamp it once for light, stamp it again for medium, and stamp it again for dark, and it doesn't bleed. So I like having that option. I also like that when you overlap the two colors, you get a really unique look. You get that from a lot of different dye inks, but something about this particular ink I really like. And you'll see that when I stamp very different colors on top of each other in one of my next examples. But do know you can do this technique with whatever dye inks you have. You could even use pigment inks, oxide ink, just try what you've got. Okay, so now I just need to stamp that leaf up in the top left and in the bottom right. So I just position it in one of those, ink it up, stamp it, and then rotate my mat again to get the other corner. Now, I mentioned if you do not have a clear, transparent grid like I'm using here, you could definitely just draw pencil lines. So what I would do is draw pencil lines maybe down the center in both directions, and then maybe an inch in from the edge, just to kind of help you get the stamps positioned for each of these steps so that you can build a pattern. But you can see how rotating your mat is very helpful. Okay, now we're on to the last position. This time I'm going to do a green. So you'll really see where this green ink overlaps with that pool color, that surf colored ink below it, creating a new color. So where your inks overlap, you really get that new look. This is something that we love with layering stamps, right? Layering stamps are great because you can build up those layers and colors and make it look dimensional. But sometimes we don't have layering stamps, so we can use other stamps and create our own patterns like this, making sure to overlap, and we get that kind of three-dimensional look. And by the way, you may have noticed my Limalicious ink there, that green one is very dry. I need to buy a re-inker for that one, so that's why I had to stamp it many times. All right, now I'm coming in with a really light color here. This is Marine, which is a great soft blue, like a true blue. And this one is very light. It's just light by design, which is great because I can get that light option. So you see here, it's very light, gorgeous color, but I can stamp it more times to make it darker and better fit my bold project. I tend to reach for the lighter and medium color inks and multiple stamp it so that I get darker results. I just feel it gives more versatility from your ink colors. So I trimmed that background down and added it to a white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I stamped Sending You a Happy Hello with black ink onto a white cardstock square and matted that with black cardstock. And that is from that Happy Hello stamp set that I showed you earlier. I also added some Trinity Stamps Dewdrops. They're white with a nice iridescent bubble on them, and it works great kind of filling in that pattern on our background. I have another example here where I did a rainbow of overlapping ink, and you can see where the inks overlapped, you get all new colors. Now I'm not going to show the process of this one because it's very much like the last one. I had my cardstock in the middle of a sticky mat, and I placed this image right at the center and stamped it. Then I shifted it down a bit, stamped it with a different color, rotated the whole mat, and stamped it with that color again. Then shifted the stamp down again, stamped, rotated, stamped again. And I continued to do so in a rainbow of color. Very similar to what we did before, but I only used that one stamp. Now I decided to keep this very simple, and I just stamped a sentiment right along the middle. This Thinking of You is from that Happy Hello stamp set that I showed you earlier. I really feel like when you do stamp layering like this, you don't need much else on your card. This is a one-layer card, a fun technique with any kind of geometric shape you may have. This would work great with a star, a heart, a regular leaf, anything that has a lot of solid to it. So here's a closer look at those overlapping colors. Notice how you have different colors that are formed in the areas where the ink overlapped. That's something really fun to do with dye inks. Really works well with dye inks, especially these ones from Simon Says Stamp, but do them with whatever dye inks you have and look at that cool pattern. Again, that's just one stamp, stamped repeatedly, overlapping. Okay, let's move on to our next example. This time I'm using individual stamps, but overlapping them and forming them to create a focal point on my card. This time I'm not using a sticky mat, so if you don't have one, this is a way to do this process. So I'm putting my white cardstock piece in the corner of my stamping tool. It's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm putting that grid on top just to help me get everything centered. If you don't have a grid, again, you could just draw light pencil lines on your cardstock and erase them when you're done. So I'm inking up this image. Again, this is one of my dry ink pads, so I'm stamping it a few times. Once I have that stamped, I'll rotate my paper 180 degrees and repeat that. So basically, I'll have the same image on the top of my card as I will on the bottom of my card, and it'll just be a mirror image. This is a really fast way, again, to fill up your card with individual stamps. Now I have a flower from that Happy Hello stamp set that I showed you earlier. So I'm using these two stamp sets together, the Geo Flower Builder and the Happy Hello. I love combining different stamps together to create different cards. It gives me more value out of the products I have in my stash. After I've stamped that flower, I'll rotate my cardstock and repeat the process. And look again how this ink allows you to get a light, medium, or dark results. I'm going for dark here. Now I'm taking another of the leaf images and I'm just positioning it so it overlaps with the green we already have. And I'm stamping it with surf ink, which is also one that really needs to be re-inked. But this is a pool color ink. But notice that where it overlaps with the green that we've already stamped, we get like this clover or Kelly green. So it looks like I used 3 different inks there, but I only used 2 to create those leaves. This is one of the fun things about stamp layering with individual stamps. You get that dimensional look that looks like you put more effort into it than you really did. Now here I've got little circle and I'm just stamping that with yellow, overlapping the pink. So you'll see a little bit of yellow, you'll see some pink, and you'll see where they overlap to form orange. I'll continue adding images to this to kind of fill it out and make it bigger. But again, everything I do on the top of my card, I'll rotate and do to the bottom of my card. I'm making sure all of my images overlap a bit, forming new colors. Once I've finished with my floral stamping, I'm taking that placement grid right on top of our background and using that to make sure that I get my thinking of you sentiment straight and centered. I don't want to mess it up at this point, and I'll stamp that sentiment with black ink. Now I did decide I wanted to trim my background down a bit. You could use a trimmer to cut this down, but I'm using my nesting rectangle frame dies from Waffle flower, simply because that inside frame is the size I wanted, and I can save that white frame for another project. I then cut 3 or 4 pieces of inexpensive cardstock to be slightly smaller than our stamped piece, and this will get glued behind the stamp piece to give it some strong dimension. You could use foam tape here, but I definitely feel this holds up much better in the mail and is more economical. I usually use scraps for this, but I'm out of my white scraps right now, so I'm just using inexpensive cardstock. I used the cling stamp that I showed you at the beginning of this video to stamp with pink ink on a pink note card that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and then I added my stamped piece on top. Here I am using a new pickup tool from Simon Says Stamp. I'll give you a closer look at this later in this video. It's a great tool. And I'm adding into our pattern some of the Trinity Stamps dewdrops. So you can see how you can take small solid images and arrange them and overlap them to create the focal point on your card. I love how I was able to create the look of new colors simply by overlapping inks. You can see that with the yellow and pink and the green and the teal. This again works with any dye inks that you may have. I have one more idea for you on layering stamps to create a pattern, and then we'll move on to some ideas, including using stencils. This time I'm starting with a cling background stamp and adding more to it. So this is a great way to step up a background stamp. I am using the Geoflower background stamp that I showed you at the beginning of this video, putting it into my Misty stamping tool and lining up my white cardstock on it so it's straight. I have my sticky mat in my stamping tool. I will close my Misty stamping tool upside down. The sticky mat will grab that cardstock and have it positioned to be stamped on straight. So that sticky mat again is helpful in this case too. All right, now I'm inking up my stamp with a dye ink. Any dye inks work. I love this Limalicious color. Again, this one needs re-inking, so I'll stamp it a few times to get a good result. Now, this technique is great for any kind of repeating pattern stamp like this one, especially if it has solid area to it. Plaids would work for this, large polka dots. Look through your stash. You likely have something that would be fun to start the pattern building. All right, I'm placing this at the center of my sticky mat again and grabbing one of the images from that flower building stamp set. And I am following the pattern of that background stamp to figure out where to place my stamp. This time is right there in the center, and I'm making sure I'm overlapping with the stamping we've already done. And you can see already, even though we've only used 2 ink colors, it looked like we used 3. And I'll continue to stamp this pattern repeatedly, just moving the stamp each time. Now, I probably could have rotated the mat like we did before, but it was easy enough to line up the stamp in each area to stamp it. Here I'm taking a dot and overlapping that with another part of the pattern. I added quite a few more dots to the pattern just for some pops of color. Then I'm coming in with a smaller dot, putting it on one of the larger, darker dots, and this time I'm stamping with a white pigment ink. This is another great ink to bring into any stamp layering or ink layering that you do. This will soften the ink that's behind it, so it just gives another fun look. Be sure to give this some time to dry or heat set it because it is a pigment ink, so it'll take some extra time to dry. I feel like a white pigment ink, a good ink pad, is one that you really should have in your crafty stash. In fact, I did a video on why I think it's the best ink pad there is, and I'll link to that up here on the top right. And you can see how that just adds even more to this background. Okay, so I fold back my sticky mat, take off my cardstock piece, and you'll notice I got a little fingerprint of ink. The way I usually handle that is I kind of scrape the top surface of the cardstock where that ink is with a craft knife. Then I take the corner of my paper sander to smooth out that area that we roughed up with the knife, and no one will ever know. In fact, I do that a lot on my cards, and you probably have never noticed. At least I hope you haven't. All right, now for a sentiment, I'm using the Simon Says Stamp CZ Designs Hi There Greeting Stamp Set and coordinating dies. Definitely a favorite of mine, and I've used it many times in videos. Now, along with this, I'm using a new From All of Us stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and there is a coordinating die set. What's great about this set is there are sentiments in there that say from all of us. So you could do hello from all of us, thanks from all of us. There's we just wanted to say, and you can put whatever greeting you want underneath it. There's we're sending, so you could do we're sending birthday wishes. So it's a great one to team up with stamps that you have to make it from your family or from a group of friends or from people at your work. So I really like this option. So I used the thanks from the Hi There Greeting stamp set, the From All of Us from the From All of Us stamp set. Both of those stamped with black pigment ink and clear heat embossed on white cardstock. And I used the coordinating dies to cut them out and add them to our background. The background I trimmed down to be slightly smaller than 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I added it to a white note card. Once again, I used the Trinity Stamps Dewdrops to just fill in the pattern on the background. I love the look of gems along a pattern like that, but you could totally skip them if you don't want the bulk. Okay, let's change gears and look at ways to do ink layering with stencils. Now, these are pretty simple ink layering ideas, but I hope they get you to look at your stencils a little differently. This card and the rest of my cards feature some products from the new Waffle Flower release. In this release, there are a bunch of butterfly-themed products, and I love them. Here we have the pop-up butterfly panel on the left and the duotone butterfly stencil on the right. These I'll be using for my first card, and I really like them. Now, there is a lot of butterfly stuff in this release that you can mix and match as you choose. I'll be using a few of the things, but wanted to show it all to you in case you love butterflies as much as I do, because there's a lot of different ways you can mix and match these for different techniques, styles of cards, and more. Now, this is a butterfly shaker die, and you can see there are these slim butterfly shaker covers that fit into these dies. I'll demonstrate how that works later, but do know Waffle Flower has a lot of these little shaker windows in different shapes, not just the butterfly. Here we have a stitching butterfly die, which of course I had to use, but we'll be doing some ink layering with that. And there's this layering stencil. I'm telling you, there's a lot that mix and matches really nicely. I really appreciate when a company puts a lot of thought into a collection like this so that you can just pick and choose what suits you. Now I'll be using this little butterfly and daisy stencil later. I like that it allows you to do a butterfly shaped cluster of butterflies or daisies, and I'll actually layer those together. And then we have the Waffle Flower Fluttering by stamp set, and there's a coordinating die set. I know I'm showing these very quickly, so if you do want a closer look, I do have the collection linked below. All right, but for this first card, I'll again be using this background die and the stencils that coordinate. So using the pop-up butterflies panel die, I'm cutting from white cardstock. This cuts butterfly wings, but keeps the center connected so that the wings can kind of pop up, giving dimension. You'll see that in a moment. I'm placing that piece onto my sticky mat. This is another great use of the sticky mat. It's great for holding your paper and stencil in place as you ink over it. Now this layering stencil set, the duotone layering stencils, there are two stencils. One stencil will allow you to ink up the left half of the butterfly. The other stencil will allow you to ink up the right half. Now I am using the first stencil to do some of the butterfly wings in a surf color. Then I will do some of the other butterfly wings in a different color. That way we'll end up with more color overall on our card. You could do one color over this whole thing to save time, but you can see it's pretty easy to do multiple colors when you're using a small inking tool as I am here. Now we can place the second stencil on top, and this will allow us to ink up the other half of the butterfly wings. And again, I'll use two colors. I'll use a green color over some and then a purplish blue color over others. By the way, be sure to check out my next video that will be out tomorrow. In that, I give more tips for selective inking like this, where you get multiple colors over one stencil. I think it's really helpful, so be sure to check it out. Okay, so now we have these butterflies that are each two-tone, but I want to step this up even more and do a little layering. So remember this butterfly and daisy stencil? I'm actually masking off one of the small butterflies using some tape. So I just have that one little butterfly kind of set off to the side there so that I can ink over it alone. And I'm lining it up with the bigger butterflies on my background and applying another color of blue ink. So what's happening is I'm layering that color very simply, but it'll give more interest to each of these butterflies. So look at your stencils. Sometimes there's little areas that you can kind of mask off and ink up just that part where you want to on your card. And in this case, it's making it look like I have layering stencils, but really I'm just using the stencils that I have creatively. Now I'm removing that tape and masking off a different butterfly. This one will be smaller than the last one, so I can do this layering butterfly on top of the smaller butterflies already on my card panel. So I masked off that little one, and now I can put color over that, and you can see how I'm building up those layers. And I'll repeat this for all of those inked butterflies on our panel. Now you could definitely stop here and have those inked butterflies with the wings that will pop up. I'll show you that in a moment. But I thought I'd fill in more of that white space on the background by showing you how you can again do selective inking of a stencil to get into those tiny areas. So I still have that small butterfly masked off with some tape. So I'm using a light color of ink and just putting that butterfly here and there in the white space in the background. Just rotating it each time and putting it in different spots. Then I will do the same with little daisies. So see those little daisies on the bottom of the stencil? I'll mask off a little daisy and ink up over that, filling in more of that white space. And when we're done, we have this fun background that looks completely different than it was intended to look by using two stencils creatively and a few different colors of ink. Now to make those butterfly wings pop up, I just kind of pinch them and pull the wings up with my fingers. Then I put glue along the back of this to add over some glitter cardstock. You can see my glitter cardstock piece there on my desk. But when I put glue across the back, I'm going to put a heavy amount of glue right on the back of the butterfly bodies. The reason I'm doing that is when that glue dries, that thick amount of glue on the back of the butterfly bodies, when that dries, it'll keep those wings forced up a little bit because some of that glue will kind of ooze to the sides, keeping those wings forced up. So even if you put this through the mail, those wings will pop up a little bit, allowing the glitter cardstock underneath to show. Now let me show you a closer look. You can see here how I have thick glue behind those butterfly bodies. I'll place that onto my glitter cardstock and give it some time to dry. It takes a bit of time for the glue to dry on the glitter. Once dry, I'll put glue on the back of that and then add it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding note card that I made from Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock, which is a light gray. Then on top of this, I have a Hello My Friend from the Simon Says Stamp CZ Design High Greeting stamp set that I showed you earlier. I stamped that with black pigment ink and clear heat embossed, used the coordinating die to cut it out, and now I'm adding it over my background with little foam squares because I want some room for those butterflies that have wings sticking up. I did layer this die cut so it's 2 or 3 thick, so I don't have to worry about it getting smushed when it's on top of these foam squares. Now, if you really want to make sure those butterfly wings do stay up a bit more, you can go and just squeeze a little bit of strong liquid adhesive right underneath the wings, right up against the fold of the wings, and leave it to dry. That will really help to keep those wings up a bit so you can see the glitter peeking out from the sides. I'm using Gina K Connect liquid adhesive with the fine tip bottle, and you can see how that's very helpful. I also wanted to add a few little glitter drops in the background there, and I thought I'd show you a closer look at the Simon Says Stamp tool that I used for that. There are these 2 new tools from Simon Says Stamp. One of them here has a wax tip, and the other end has a scoring tool or a stylus, which is great for scoring or making impressions. And here's the wax tip that's great for picking up embellishments and placing them where you want. Then they have the Place and Pierce wand. This one has a piercing tool on one end, and then this little kind of sticky tip that allows you to pick up embellishment and place them where you want. So there are 2 different tools. I'm tending to use the second one, the Pierce and Place tool. That one I just find different than others. I already have some that have the wax tip on one end. But if you're looking for different options for a pickup tool, these are 2 great options. Now, I did use my Hero Arts Circle Confetti die to cut from some of that same glitter cardstock that I used on the background of my card. Then I'm going to use those little dots that background cut and use them as embellishments on the back of our card. So I'm using that Pierce and Place tool, and that little green ball is just sticky enough to pick up that little dot of confetti and place it onto our card in the liquid adhesive. Now, again, I use several different tools for picking up things and placing them where I want. I really like this one because it has a smaller tip that's a little more durable than the wax tip, but really I think both work great. I just wanted to demonstrate it for you. It has a great price point, and there are those 2 different versions of the wands available. I'll have them linked below if you want a closer look. All right, here is a look at the completed card. You can see we have little glitter drops in the background now, and the glitter that peeks through from behind the butterflies. We were able to layer our inks with stencils to get that kind of layered look on those bigger pop-up butterflies, and then we used our stencils creatively in the background to kind of fill in that white space. Okay, let's do some more ink layering with stencils. This is a really simple one, and it shows you how to use those shaker covers from Waffle Flower. Again, they come in different shapes, but I'm using the butterfly today. So I have the Butterfly and Daisy stencil. This is the same one that we used on our last example, but I'm inking up the butterfly with different shades of blue, teal, and green inks. I'm just putting color down anywhere over the openings and then coming in with the next one and making sure to overlap. So this is giving me just multiple colors, but it's only over one stencil. That's another great way to really step up your stencils, is to do a blend of colors over one. Now you could leave this as is, but I'll take that daisy and layer it on top. It's really meant to be used separately, but I think layering on top is a fun way to get a layered look. So I'm doing some of the same colors, but a lighter hand. Now, another thing you could do is, if you just want butterflies, you could ink up the butterflies, clean your stencil, flip it over, and ink up the butterflies again, and you'll get kind of a layered look with butterflies. But I thought it was fun to use the butterflies and the daisies together. And look at that fun ink layered stenciling. Okay, so now for the shaker window, I have a piece of pool cardstock that is 4 by 5¼ inches, and I'm cutting the smaller of the 2 shaker window butterfly dies from the top center. I'll then use the Waffle Flower Tiny Crosses texture die. I love this die. You'll see me use it a lot. And I'm cutting that on top of that stencil window we already cut. I'm a big fan of dies like this that add simple detail to solid backgrounds. Okay, now let's create our shaker window. Now this piece here is a little too big, so I'm just going to trim off some of the excess. I could have used the larger shaker die to do this, but it was easy enough to cut with scissors. Now we have the little shaker window. I love these shaped shaker windows from Waffle Flower. I have the bump facing up towards the camera, and I've placed tape along the flat edge around that. And you really just want to make sure you have enough tape there. I used a lot. You don't need to use that much in this case at all. Then I'll take my die cut window and place it on top. So you can see the bump is sticking out the top of our cardstock background. Now we can place double-sided tape around the back side of this. Now this you want to make sure that you kind of seal off. I'm not really worried about these big shaker bits falling out, but I do like to seal it off just to be safe. So I put double-sided tape all around it. Right now the bump is facing down, so there's a little well there. I'm taking honeybee diamonds. These are really fun in shaker windows. And I'm placing them on top of my stenciled background right towards the center because we're going to place our window on top of it. There are a few different ways to do this, but I find this to be the easiest. So I'm pushing all of those shaker bits towards the center. Then we will take the window and place it right on top. So the bump of the window is facing up towards the camera, and look at how that shakes around beautifully. If you like a true shaker window that shakes easily, these Waffle Flower shaker windows are definitely worth checking out, and I'll link to the collection below. All right, now I used the other butterfly die to cut a little body from glitter cardstock, and I trimmed the wings off so we only had the body, and I'm gluing that right on top of the shaker window. It was a little too light, so I used a dark gray Copic marker to make that glitter paper a little bit darker silver. You could use any alcohol-based markers for this, even Sharpies. All right, now here is a look at the completed card. I used the Flutter by stamp set and coordinating die for that sentiment. I stamped it with black on white cardstock and die cut that out and glued it right on top of our butterfly. You can also see that tiny cross pattern in the background. I just think that's so much fun. And you can see how freely those little diamonds shake inside of that shaker window. Also, we have the ink layering that we did by simply layering 2 different stencils together and inking with multiple colors. All right, our last card here has a different type of color layering. In this case, we're layering inks with the stencil and stitching on top. I'm a big fan of stitching on cards, so when I saw Waffle Flower had these stitching dies, I had to include them. So I'm using the stitching die along with the solid butterfly around it and cutting them together from white cardstock. This is a heavyweight white cardstock, but you could use whatever cardstock you have. I'm now placing that onto my sticky mat and then placing this coloring stencil on top of it. Now this coloring stencil is one stencil and you just move it around to ink up different parts of the butterfly. It's pretty easy to figure out, but you can always check the website if you're unsure on how to line them up. So I lined up the first part of the stencil right on top of those stitched holes, and then I inked it. Now I'm moving to the next part and inking over that. So I could have die cut after we did the inking, but by doing it this way, the ink goes in a little heavier in those stitched holes, and it allows those stitch dots to kind of stand out even more. So if you like the look of this piercing, you could totally skip the stitching and leave it as is, and it would be this colorful butterfly with pierced holes. But you know me, I like the stitching, so I'll add that in a moment. I'm also ink layering different colors over each other, again creating new colors as we've done many times in this video. Next, let's create that diamond on the background of the card. For this, I'm using the new nested dotted dies from Waffle Flower. There's rectangles, squares, circles, and diamonds. These don't actually cut a shape. Instead, they just create little holes in that shape. So you can use them as a pierced background or frame, or you can stitch on them. I chose to stitch on them today. By the way, you could use several of the circle ones together and create a stitched rainbow. But what I'm doing today is using one of the diamonds, and I'm taping that up against the edge of white cardstock, and then using my trimmer to cut along the other edges. Waffle Flower does have dies that line up with these, but I couldn't find my diamond dies, so I'm just hand cutting right along the edges using my Tim Holtz rotary trimmer. So we'll end up with a diamond shape with those little pierced dots around the inside. You could again leave this as is and just allow color to show through, but I will be doing some stitching on it. Off screen, I did do stitching on the butterfly using light green and light blue thread. I've shown stitching many times in videos, so I didn't want to show it all here, but I will show the basic stitching that I did around the outside of that diamond. I'm taking 6-ply DMC floss, I'll link to what I use below, and pulling out 2 of those plies, so 2 thin threads. I'm then feeding those 2 threads through my needle, and I'll double it over. So when it's doubled over, I'll have the ends all together, and I'll tape that to the back of our project. So when I go to stitch with this, since it's doubled over, it's actually 4-ply of that floss. The advantage of folding it over like this is my needle won't fall off as I stitch. So I'll tape the ends on the back of my piece and then start stitching. There are many ways to do a little back stitch around the edge here. What I like to do, because I feel it gives the best results, is to go up one hole and then go back down the last one. Up one hole, back down the last one, and continue to do this all the way around. Now, I'm not focusing much on the stitching today, but if you do want to learn more about stitching on cards, I'll link to a very complete video up here on the top right that you can check out. By the way, I apologize if you hear the thunder in the background, but God had plans for a thunderstorm during my voiceover. All right, so I put everything together on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. I did use that Tiny Crosses background die on the pool cardstock. We have our stitch frame. I used a thank you from the Happy Hello stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. And then we have our ink layered and stenciled butterfly on top. I added Trinity Stamps dewdrops just for a little bit of shine. All right, there you have many different ways to layer your inks to get new looks, new colors, and make the most of your products. I hope you'll try this out with some of the products you have. If you're interested in what I used, I always link it below in my YouTube description, and you can go to my blog for much more information, along with a way to save cards for future reference. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon and have a wonderful week.